Hi, everyone, and welcome to our event with the Yukon Human Rights Commission in honor of International Human Rights Day 2022. The theme for this year's Human Rights Day celebrates the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which will be 75 years old next year. Today, we'll be focusing on Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Before starting, we'd like to acknowledge the lands we occupy. The Yukon Human Rights Commission staff are honored to live, work, and travel within the traditional territories of all 14 Yukon First Nations. We respectfully acknowledge that we are presenting from the traditional territories of the Kwanlin-Dun First Nation and the Tan-Quechan Council. We have immense gratitude for the lands and waters we hold space on, and to the generations past and present who have sustained these lands. We are really, really excited for our speakers who have joined us today to share their experiences, and Virju will be taking it from here. So I would like to welcome everyone. And Virju will take it from here.
Thank you so much, Abby. And I would like to welcome all of you joining us virtually for this year's commemoration of International Human Rights Day, which is an event that we mark every year. And the themes are always in line with those released by the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And this year's theme is to shed awareness on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Next year will be the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to this afternoon's event. This year, we decided that, and we're very fortunate to have been joined by 4 guests who will introduce themselves shortly. So we have Dr. Nazar and Siddique, Dr. Shabnam Nazar, and we are also joined, which is one family involved in the Weber Academy litigation. And we are also joined by Sarmad and Farhad Amir, who is the other family involved in the same litigation, series of human rights cases which emanated from Alberta almost 10 years ago in one of the most highly publicized and highly focused on human rights cases in Canada in the last 25 years or so. Though, as many of you may know recently, there has been a lot that's been happening in the human rights world. And so the format for this afternoon's discussion will be a discussion between myself and our speakers, followed by a question and answer session. You can ask any questions that you'd like for those of you that have registered for this event and are joining via Zoom in the chat feature, and we would be delighted to answer that. And so the rules of engagement for this afternoon will take the form of a discussion between myself and our speakers, almost like an interview. Hopefully it'll be much more pleasant than that, and certainly we aspire to be not too sedating, so I'm sure that the questions and the discussion will be very lively. And so with that being said, I'd like for the 4 of you, if you can, in any order that you'd like, if you can tell us a little bit about yourselves. So who you are, where you are, what you're doing, undoubtedly interesting stuff that it is. Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So I guess I can start. My name is Nazar and Siddique. I'm 25 years old. I am in London, Ontario, and I'm currently completing my residency in diagnostic radiology. I'm in my 3rd year. of the residency program. I did medical school in Calgary, and I did my undergraduate studies in UBC Vancouver, in integrated sciences, microbiology, and physiology. Completed a few years of that and then went on to medical school. So currently that's what I'm doing career-wise, and then we try to get involved in our local masjid, our local mosque, and our local community as much as we can in our spare time.
Wonderful. Great. And how about you, Sarma? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Sarma Damler. I studied geology at university. So I got a bachelor's from UBC in geology and then a master's from the University of Alberta in petroleum geology. I have a couple years of experience in construction, and I'm currently looking to get back into geology.
Fabulous. And Dr. Nazar, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, I am a physician. I don't work as a physician. I'm been doing a stay-home mom. And recently I am also involved with a lot of community projects to help the different member of community, that is Muslim community. Right now, I am with Naman in London, Ontario.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Farhat, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Sarmad's mom, and I'm also stay-home mom. But we are doing a lot of community projects. Me and Shabnam, we are both involved in some community projects like at the masjid, and also we are taking few classes like Quran and Hadith and then Tajweed. So yeah, this is what we are doing at the moment.
Wonderful. No, and thank you for sharing a little bit about yourselves. And I think it might be helpful for me to first summarize. Of course, you were the four of you as sets of parents and sets of, at the time, children, involved in human rights complaints, or a series of them that garnered a lot of attention all across the country, starting in 2015 and onwards. And I thought it would be helpful to summarize that. This all began when Naman and Sarmad, you were students at a school called Weber Academy. At some point you enrolled in that school. Certain events had transpired, which resulted in you filing human rights complaints. And those human rights complaints got a lot of attention, and those human rights complaints were filed against the school. And those complaints in some respects are still ongoing. At least that's my understanding. So almost 10 years later. But that being the shortest of summaries, I thought maybe I could ask you, could you first start by walking us through your experiences at Weber Academy? So for example, could you take us through, for instance, your decision to enroll at that school and your experiences with the teachers, the school administration, the students, and the events that ultimately gave rise to your human rights complaints?
Would you like me to go first, or?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Dr. Nazar, if you really want to start, and any of you can jump in at any point in time after that.
Okay. Naman was in an Islamic school till grade 9, and then we decided to take him to a university preparatory school. And Sarmad, his parents wanted the same thing. We are best friend, they're best friend. So we do a lot of things together. So we decided to take them to Weber Academy. because it's one of the best schools for university preparatory. And because, especially for Naman, this was because leaving in Islamic school and going into public, not private school, but not a faith specific. It was so. This was we asked, both of the mothers asked them that we have obligatory prayers, and then we will be praying, and it would be maybe 2, maybe 3, depending upon the time of the, and they agreed to it. So we went. Administration in general was very cooperative, and kids were praying for 2.5 weeks. The whole ordeal started after 2.5 weeks. As a matter of fact, teachers were very respectful and very helpful towards kids, and they were giving them spaces to pray and stuff. But after 2.5 weeks, when Dr. Weber realized that they're praying, and that's when the thing started.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Go ahead, Naman.
So I just wanted to add a little bit just about the experiences that we had in those first couple of weeks there. We approached a couple of, actually one specific administration member, and we basically just asked her that we need a few minutes just to pray. It's not going to be, it's not going to require anything. We just need a room. And they were able to provide a spare classroom, I think it was actually a spare office for a couple of weeks. And there was no disruption at all. In fact, I think aside from that administration member, nobody else knew that it was happening. And at some point, like my mom mentioned, they, I guess they told Dr. Weber, and then he called us and he basically said that we would not be allowed to pray. So that was, I guess, in a sense, quite surprising to us, just given the fact that everything was going fairly smoothly. We were adjusting to the new school environment. We were starting to do well, making some new friends, developing relationships with teachers and, you know, other administration members. And then this just sort of blindsided us.
And you mind if I ask quickly, Naman and Sarmad, how old were you when this was happening?
So
Both 14?
I think 14. Yeah.
14, 15?
Yeah, I was in grade 9, and then Sarmad was in
grade 10.
grade 10.
Yep.
So, as I understand it, so you attended the school, you let them know that you had obligations, religious obligations that committed you to praying at certain times in the day, and that some of those prayer times may coincide with the school day. And for the benefit of our audience, you know, prayer means something different, you know, depending on, you know, your religious persuasion, whatever that is, or even if you don't have a religious persuasion, the idea of prayer can sometimes be vague. Like, how long, what was involved with these prayers? Was this something that was very much involved, obtrusive, that involved other members of the school community, or was this more of a situation where you just needed to find some sort of corner in a classroom somewhere for a few minutes at a time, you know, out of the way from everything else? Like, could you maybe walk us through a little bit of the significance and what that entailed a little bit?
Yeah, so it really didn't require any sort of intrusion whatsoever. It's basically a 5-minute, you know, 5 to 10 minutes at maximum process. It involves, well, demonstrable bowing and kneeling and prostration, and And so for that reason, that's why we asked the administration member if we could just use a spare classroom or somewhere perhaps a little bit more private. Didn't need to be like a set prayer space or prayer area,
Whatever was available.
whatever was available. Exactly. There was no requirement. And so we basically would just ask for a few minutes from our teachers when the prayer time coincided with class time. We would go to that office and then we would just pray, leave. Nobody would know what was going on. It's essentially you know, a kid walks into a black box and comes out 5 minutes later. Nobody's the wiser.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point, and you mentioned earlier that, you know, there was a school administrator that knew about this, but other than that, nobody even knew that it was happening. So that's in a way how nondescript this was. So of course, you know, given the facts and given, you know, where we are and everything that happened since then, at some point, something happens that gives rise to a human rights complaint, right? So at some point, this goes from one school administrator knowing, or you know, letting your teachers know, and the teachers seemingly not having any issue with any of that. When does this become an issue then of concern to anybody? Walk us through what happens, like what gives rise to that.
I believe it was a Saturday when Dr. Weber called me, and he said that your kids are praying and they're not allowed to pray in the school. And I was kind of shocked because, and amazingly, 4 of us were together at that time.
And we asked at the time of admission.
Yeah.
Like, this was we made sure. And they said that the admission in charge said that, yeah, there's no problem.
So I mentioned it to, when Dr. Weber said that you're not allowed to pray, I said, not only we asked, but they're doing it already. Did they do anything wrong that have elicited this response? But his statement was something like, it's just the school policy. We are non-denominational, and we are not allowing any prayers. And over the course, I asked him, why were we not told at the time of admission? And he said, member of the administration was not clear. They were not sure of our policy, which was his policy. And that's why and I even told him, I said, if they made a mistake, don't punish us, because we made sure that we announced that we are going to pray. And this prayer is done when kids left Weber Academy to another school, which is Rundle Academy. It's an equivalent school. And they were entertaining our request, and nothing happened. There was no problem. So it was his personal policy, or that he believed that prayers are not allowed in the school. They can happen outside the school, outside the boundary of the school, but not within the school.
And so Dr. Weber being the head of the school, yes? So on the Saturday, and just to maybe clarify for the benefit of the audience, you got a call from Dr. Weber, who's the head of the school, telling you that this was a problem, and that you could pray outside of the school property, but that this can't take place within the school's grounds. And so what effect did that have in practice? So both in terms of, so what happens after that Saturday call, and what were the effects of you being communicated this decision that this cannot happen on the school's premises? Could you walk us through that?
So
when I hang up the phone, the first thing I turn around to the boys, I said, have you done anything? Because things were going fine for 2.5 weeks, something like that. And then suddenly this happened. it was very shocking. On the phone, I asked Dr. Weber if we could have meeting and further inquire what went wrong. So he granted, and over the course of a few months, we had a couple of meetings where community members were involved as well to make sure maybe we don't understand something, or to let them know this is not just a prayer, it's an obligatory prayer, it's a must prayer, it's a defining prayer, which if we were not to do the prayer, we can be out of the faith of Islam. So it is this fundamental. And
Yeah.
this is, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, but go ahead, you carry on. What happened?
I was just gonna mention along that same line, like my mom was mentioning, that the prayer is so fundamental. It's like breathing. You actually just can't. Like I can't imagine not praying. It's not even a matter of, there's a rule in place now, maybe I should change. It's just I don't think me or Surmad could really imagine not praying. And so in practice, what happened from that point was that we would try to pray in classrooms. So in the classrooms of trusted teachers who would allow us to pray just 5 minutes at the back of the classroom when no one was there. So we did that for a little while. And then at some point, Dr. Weber communicated to those teachers that they are not allowed to pray here. So at that point, we started to pray outside. And this was in winter time in Calgary. So there's quite a bit of snow. So we'd take some time, go outside, set up our prayer mats on the snow. Everything would get quite wet. We'd perform our prayers. By the time we were done, our clothes would be wet. It's quite cold. And then some other thing you had.
I sort of developed this weird allergy to cold. Even I would get a lot of like hives and just a reaction on the skin, which was pretty painful. And eventually it got so cold that we couldn't really pray outside. So that was when we started to pray in whatever corner of the school we could find. And at times we would almost stand guard while one person prays to make sure that we're not getting caught. Right? Yeah. It was getting to that extent.
And there was actually at one point, I was caught praying in the school library. So I was praying quietly in a quiet portion of the library where nobody was there. It was sort of hidden away from the remainder of the library just by bookshelves. So I started praying, and then out of the corner of my eye, I noticed somebody was approaching. And then as this person got closer, my stress level started to really increase. I realized that I had been caught. And then as this person came closer, I realized that it was an administration member. I didn't know at the time who specifically it was, but I understood that it was either some teacher or an administration member. And she basically came very close to me and just sort of said, "What are you doing?" And she said that quite a few times. And I was in the portion of the prayer where you actually prostrate. So what that means is that you actually kneel down and actually place your forehead on the floor. And at that moment, I felt so much, I'd never experienced this before, but I actually experienced shame. Shame, fear, just feeling that sense of I'm doing something wrong. And so I actually had to break my prayer, which is a very uncommon thing. Like, that's really something that's reserved for emergencies. So I actually broke my prayer. And then when I got up to speak to this administration member, she basically said, you know, we're in conversations with your families, we're still discussing this about the prayer issue. And I basically said, I think you need to talk to my parents about this. And then basically I left the library at that point. So yeah, there was experiences like that. So I think that's what happened on a more practical level after being told that we couldn't pray.
I want to pick up on a point that you just mentioned, Naman, which is after you're told by this administrator that this is a conversation that they're going to have with your parents. And Dr. Nazar and Farhad, perhaps if you can answer this question. So presumably the administration has a conversation with you now about the fact that your children are praying in the school in violation of the school's policy. What happens at that moment in terms of did you challenge the school's policy on this? And if you did, what were the consequences, if any, as a result of those challenges? Or, did you just accept that this is a policy and continue to attempt to do this secretly, as you have been doing? Can you shed some light on that?
Yes. We were already in the process of talking to them about the prayer issue. So this was clearly not something that she was not aware of. It was, to me, it was a harassment, and to scare a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid to confront him personally. Because we were already having a conversation about this, then there was no need for her to approach him. We definitely, because this was an obligatory prayer, and we did everything we could to notify them that that's how we're going to be in the school. So we just could not accept Dr. Weber's personal opinion about you're not allowed to pray. And we also discussed this issue. Because I was shocked when he said you're not, because he's a member of a cabinet minister in Ralph Klein's government, and he was an influential man, a government representative. So whatever came from him, I thought maybe this is genuine, that maybe we don't have rights. So we even questioned at one point, are we gonna, because we can't leave the prayer, this is who we are. So do we have to leave Canada then? And so for that reason, I call every Calgary Board of Education, I call minister's office in Ottawa, lawyers, community members, and everybody, and made sure that we are not doing something illegal. And when we were sure that this is not illegal, this is our right, we can't leave our religion outside the school and come inside. That's stripping our rights, our sanity, our peace of mind. So what we what kids kept doing is that they started to pray outside, even in the fire escape. One person is on the guard and the second one is praying, but we didn't stop. We couldn't stop. We had to pray.
And did that lead to, when you say that you couldn't stop or didn't stop, are the children still at Weber Academy by this point?
Yes, they stayed in the Weber Academy, and at that point, around that time, I don't exactly know the in matter of time, but in around that time that we complained to Human Rights Commission, and they investigated, and also school expelled the kids. They wrote a letter stating, since you are not following our rules, therefore you are no longer accepted for the next year, because we were already paid some sort of fee for the next year. So they returned that. They revoked the application and said, you're no longer accepted. So basically they kicked us out of the school.
So the school expels Naman and Sarmad for, I suppose, violating this rule that they had, or that they imposed, preventing you from discharging your religious obligations.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to correct a little bit that we started the school in December, and in June would be finished. So this process was going on. So they did not expel right at that moment, but they did not let us continue for the next year.
For the next year.
For the next year. So they accepted us for that 6 month or 5 month, whatever that time period was. But we already knew that we are no longer accepted. So that's expelling in and it is for children who are 14 years old, and we are immigrant family, and we are visibly Muslim. So the amount of the amount of like the stuff that we are facing, kind of discrimination and looks or whatever, it's more than the average other person. So this was humiliating. This was degrading. This was actually, it was scary at one point when he said that he has no problem. Dr. Weber said that he has no problem for the kids to go outside the school and pray. And I said to Dr. Weber, I said, have you realized that when they're outside in the prayer, they're going to be focusing on their prayer. Somebody could hit them, injure them, hurt them. Do you realize how difficult it is? Because I wanted to make sure that he understands the depth of the sentence that he just used, that they can go outside the boundary of the school. And he said, if you sign the document stating that they can go outside, we don't have a problem with that. And that was very scary as a parent, that our kids are no longer safe. So This was a very scary moment. And I think even one of the tribunal judges made some sort of a comment regarding that. The safety of the kids were a question.
And Naman Sarmad, if you're comfortable perhaps in sharing with us, so at some point you discover that you're no longer welcome to enroll in the school for the next academic year. Could you talk about when you found that out, where did your thoughts go to? Can you tell us about, how you felt about that, what your thoughts were around that, any reactions that you had upon learning about that?
I think when I found out, I was really quite shocked that it had gotten to that extent. I guess as a ninth grader, I didn't quite realize the extent to which Dr. Weber was willing to go to make sure that that policy was implemented. I felt like I had, again, done something wrong. That now I have this mark on my record that I've essentially been expelled for praying. And when I juxtaposed the fact that I had been expelled for praying with the fact that, you know, the school puts up Christmas trees during the holiday season, and allows, you know, other faiths to visibly, you know, display symbols of their faith. So, for example, members of the Sikh faith were allowed to wear turbans. I had this sense that there was some religions were okay, and my religion was not okay.
Very interesting. Sarmad, similarly, what was your, you know, thoughts or reactions upon learning of not being able to re-enroll?
In a way, it was a relief, because the next school we went to, we were able to do our prayers with no problem at all. The teacher was very supportive. So it felt like in this new school, I am allowed to be who I am, and I can be, you know, a student in this academic environment. Meanwhile, in Weber Academy, you have to sort of leave that identity outside, and you can only, and that's the only way into this academic school. So in a way, it was a relief that we're getting out of this. Yeah.
And a question for all four of you, something that piques my curiosity, which is, from what you've described, a lot of the decisions around telling you that you can't pray or you have to go outside the school grounds, that sort of thing, the decision not to permit you to re-enroll, those seem to be decisions from school administrators. Could you talk about, you know, both as parents and as students at Weber Academy, did your teachers come to know about any of this, and did they have any reactions if they knew about, you know, this sort of the struggle that was happening with the school administrators, whether those were expressions of support or of support of yourselves, or, you know, the opposite or anything in between? Like, what were the reactions of the teachers who I imagine you would have formed relationships with by now in terms of attending their classes? They've gotten to know you, they've marked some of your tests and your essays and parent-teacher interviews, so they, you know, naturally get to know your parents a little bit. What was your experiences with the teachers? And maybe I'll extend that also to some of the students, you know, that you know, the both of you mentioned you had developed friendships at the school. What was the reaction from the rest of the school community, I guess, that weren't administrators to all of this, if they knew anything about this at all?
As parents, I met a few parents and we discussed about that. They were supportive, quietly. They would not be supportive publicly. Kids were supportive, and I guess Naman and Sarmad can talk about it. And teachers did approach a couple of teachers when we would go and pick Sarmad and Naman up from school. They would also quietly say, what's going on it's not right, it's not fair, we don't support that. But we as teachers, we don't really have power on saying anything. So that was good, and in a way that at least quietly somebody do appreciate that, that's how, and maybe Sarmad and Naman can tell you about their experience.
Yeah, they were all supportive. The teachers were, they said that there's nothing sort of like, it's not disruptive for the school and for the classes and the other students, because they quietly go and pray 5 minutes, do their prayer and come back to the class, and there was no disruption, or they were not missing any of the classes. Like it's a 5 minutes thing, and they come back and it's like.
Because both of the kids were exceptionally strong academically and very respectful. They, as a matter of fact, Dr. Weber have acknowledged that they were exceptional kids with exceptional behavior, exemplary behavior. So their performance at the school, their behavior at the school, that was not a problem at all, and the prayer itself was not a disruption at all. So everybody, like the teachers that I talked to and the students and the parents, they were supportive, but there was this fear that that you can't say it openly. And I guess this maybe was in Dr. Weber's mind, I don't know, but it certainly felt like that if he is strong, then we will go away, we will disappear. But our faith is too important for us.
From the perspective of the students, anybody that we spoke to about what was going on was very supportive. In fact, there was a few times when me and Sarmad were praying, and I was praying and Sarmad was, standing guard. And there was actually a few students that came by and saw us praying, and they were extremely respectful.
Even though they were so young, they were like in elementary school. They were, they were quiet. They were, they were shouting when they were coming to us, and then when they saw us, they were quiet. They quieted down. It wasn't. Nobody was disrespectful to us from.
And I think like one of them said to the others, "Oh, they're praying. We should quiet down." So all the students were very respectful. The teachers that knew about it, like I say, some of them actually were allowing us to pray in their classrooms, and until the order came from the administration to stop that. But
so the teachers did as much as they could to help us, but for them there was a limit.
Yeah, exactly. So we didn't have any problems with teachers or students or anybody else.
No, thanks for sharing that. Now I want to pivot a little bit now. And thank you so much for sharing the experiences, that you had both as parents and as children attending the school. At some point, you filed a human rights complaint with the Alberta Human Rights Commission. Can you talk about your experiences navigating the human rights program? At some point, you file a human rights complaint at the Alberta Human Rights Commission, and that complaint is accepted. Tell us about your experiences, maybe first with the human rights process at a human rights commission. What did that look like? Maybe walk us through that a little bit, if you can.
Being immigrant to Canada and Dr. Weber being a minister, so that carried a lot of weight on his end and fear on our side. So when we realized that this is going on, we tried to solve it. It didn't work. So when I called different places, I realized that the Human Rights Commission assured me and explained that this is the right way to approach, where you complain and then we will investigate if this is if there is misunderstanding. We talk to them. And I was reluctant because our kids were young, and going to this level, it's not easy, because even part of our community, some member of the community who were fearful, they want success, but any cost they will pay to achieve that success, even if it is giving up religion or something. They even tried to tell us, why you are doing this? You are making it difficult for us. You are a visible minority, and we are also part of that minority. So people are going to look down upon. We're going to suffer. You shouldn't be doing that. So there was like a not only Weber Academy behavior, but at the same time, part of our community.
Yeah.
So we were in the rock and a hard place kind of a thing. But we were very fortunate when we approached Human Rights Commission, they supported us in every possible way. And they made a lot of things clear for us and explained to us that, how we will approach this and investigate and fight for someone who has no voice. So this process became very easy. The only thing about the process of Human Rights Commission is that this is to 2020 and started in 2012 something. So it's like 10 years. And we've been back and forth from one step to the second step to the third step to the fourth, and then come back to start again to first step and second. And right now we are thinking, like, is it ever going to stop, or is it going to keep going? Even I believe one of the judge expressed his concern as well, because it's very clear, like, we are human beings, and this is our right to not be depressed, because for prayer for us is antidepressant. Serenity, like mentally becoming stable, be a productive member of the society, and doing your living your life. It's not just a piece of cloth, or it's who we are. It's like if we are hurt on a surface, you can see there is a fracture or bleeding. But this pain that it's inside, emotionally, nobody can see it. But our kids suffer still. When you guys reached us and say that you want to interview us, and we were talking about it, you could see how they are happy, but when they talk about their experiences, their tone goes down, and it's very painful. I don't know if they're ever gonna be free of this pain. So Human Rights Commission exceptionally supported us. Everybody at the HRC they were our champion.
I just wanted to add a quick point about that. I agree. The Human Rights Commission was very supportive the entire way. With regards to the actual process itself, when we went to the hearing, I think it was 16 at the time, and I had never been in a court situation before, and I didn't really have the advantage of somebody going before me to give their testimony so that I could see how the process actually works. So when I went up to the stand, I was asked questions by the human rights lawyer, without any difficulties. But then when I was cross-examined, took, I think, 6 hours or so. And it was extremely stressful. The questions the lawyer was asking was basically, asking a 16-year-old kid to give a scholarly Islamic position on intricacies of prayer, trying to group me into a particular school of thought, a school of thought of Islamic law that I didn't really even understand, quite rude. And I think even afterwards, listening to some of the other questions that the lawyer asked some of the other witnesses, there were questions around, is it true in Islam that you can, beat your wife? Questions like that really just left a bad taste in our mouth, though, put it lightly.
And presumably having nothing to do whatsoever with what got you to, which had nothing to do with the facts that gave rise to the human rights complaint in the first place.
Yeah.
And just by way of summary, of course, having looked at the procedural history, I think most people involved with human rights in the country are probably, aware of this, but just for the benefit of the audience to understand. So this goes in front of, and I should say that the Alberta Human Rights Commission and Alberta Human Rights Tribunal is very similar to the process in the Yukon in terms of how things operate. And so you end up before a human rights tribunal, which is very similar to a court in terms of the feel and what that looks like. In 2015 or in 2014, they make a decision in your favor. In other words, saying that there was a finding that your human rights were indeed violated. This is in 2015. There is then an appeal from the tribunal's decision to the Court of Appeals, was then in 2016, which upheld the tribunal's decision, which was in your favor. In 2018, this goes to the Alberta Court of Appeal, and the Alberta Court of Appeal orders a new human rights tribunal, which happens in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. That tribunal again decides in your favor, increases the award in damages, and orders the respondent to engage in some training at their expense. That is then appealed to the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench again in 20, and that appeal is dismissed. So again, that's decided in your favor in 2021. So you filed this human rights complaint in 2012, and in the year 2021, the Court of Queen's Bench again upheld the decision that your human rights have been violated. Is this still going on? I mean, that's almost that spans a decade almost. I think in that time you mentioned your children when it started, and to hear, for example, that you are now a medical resident, for instance, and Sarmad, you're a geologist with a master's degree, just to kind of put that in perspective. Is this still going on, or is everything done now? Like, is the story at an end, or if you can comment on that, of course.
I would say that it feels like it's never going to end. It's just going to keep going, because going through the whole trial one more time and then going through all those steps that you have stated, it's a very long process, and we don't know, if it's going to finish, if it's going to go on for how long. That part is personally, it's like you want a closure, you want this to be ended. And because every time there's something happens, things comes on the news, and then it's again this media is talking, and then there is these people on the social media, and then talking about this negative thoughts and stuff. It's like a lot of people are not getting what they're the concept of what's going on. They're not understanding it, or maybe they don't want to understand it. So it is a continuous, continuously. It is traumatic. It's like it's not going to finish. I don't know if it's going to finish or not. This is my feeling.
Yeah, this is all of us. We are like going through this. It looks like it's never ending.
Because the thing is that he can make a one miss. We have to win every time in order to stay, but he can have one win and everything will be lost. So it just doesn't. It's very difficult to understand.
And like specifically about the process, so I think the appeal that Justice Neufeld made that decision, I think they appealed that decision. So that's still in the process right now. There's another appeal on the appeal that just happened.
So they're appealing the 2021 Court of Queen's Bench decision that upheld that basically upheld the tribunal's decision in your favor from 2020. So that is being appealed yet again. So you're not out of the woods, so to speak. Like there's still another process. So this might take over a decade. In other words, from the sounds of it. If I can ask you about the role of, and today is International Human Rights Day, and one of the things at the Yukon Human Rights Commission, as well as other human rights commissions, is we often look at the role of training and public education. And by that, I mean talking about educating people about human rights. And I'm wondering in your particular case, I'm curious what you think about, and I'm not sure whether or not there was a lot of this in your particular case. So, for example, if all of you knew anything about human rights at all, at the moment you engage with the Human Rights Commission in Alberta, you mentioned that they were very supportive and they were very clear in explaining things to you. In terms of the role of public education on human rights, do you think things would have been different at all if either any of you or, and here's the curveball, the respondent, if the respondent had any sort of awareness or education or training on human rights? Do you ever feel that maybe things would have gone differently, either if you had access to more of this, or if the other side, the respondent or Weber Academy in this case, if they had an understanding of human rights? Could you maybe comment on that a little bit?
Well, education is always good, only for that person who wants to be educated, who's interested in education. We were ignorant. We had no idea when this happened, and it would have been great that if we were aware of if there are someone's rights are violated, then there are systems set to help them and support them. And so it would have been extremely beneficial. But I don't know if I can say the same for the Weber Academy, because HRC tried very hard investigating and constantly, telling them what it is that we have rights. So them, I don't know, but it would be very beneficial to teach kids, to teach young people, and even to immigrants. You know, if there are, if your rights are violated, it would be, there is an organization and you go and talk to them and they will guide you and help you. So we were stumbled on this information by community members that were, so it's the blessing of Allah that we found the right people at the right time.
Yes.
And we were directed. So if we did not know about the function of human right, we probably would be, I don't know, maybe at another place.
Farhad, Naman, Sarmad, anything to add to Dr. Naman's response?
Yes,
No.
it was Human Rights Commission that accepted our application. This acceptance was assurance that we have right, we have our religious rights that we that we didn't know before, and our community should be aware of, and should be educated about that we have our rights, and there is an institution that is upholding our rights.
Right. And maybe final question. I know that there's going to be questions from the participants this afternoon. So I'm going to ask you maybe a final question just before we get to that briefly, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. But I'm sure that there are a lot of parents in attendance, teachers in attendance this afternoon, I mean, and maybe even some students. Is there anything that you would offer by way of advice to parents, children, or youth who may decide to pursue a human rights complaint, or, you know, while they're dealing with something similar? What advice would you offer to those people listening who are thinking about some of these issues in their own mind, both whether that's as parents or whether they happen to be children themselves? Anything that you would offer by way of advice?
As a parent, my advice is to be very close, be in touch with your kids, be very close to your kids, because they're scared. When they're scared, they don't even share with their parents. But if they're close to you, then they're willing to share what they're going through at their school or even at work. Like, I advise, even when their kids are older, they have a good relationship with them. And this is time consuming. It is you need to have strong nerves and emotions, emotionally strong to go through this process. So it is challenging. It's very challenging. However, the benefit of going through this is you're making easy for the future. And we saw this case when we were let go from Weber Academy. We found another school. It was good, but we felt this sense of obligation towards people of faith, not just Muslim. Anybody who wants to practice their faith, they should be able to feel that yes, they can, And in this process, we felt the fear for a lot of people. Parents, they wanted to, but they were fearful. Kids were fearful. Teachers were fearful. So we felt that we were the voice of all these people, and we have to stand up. So more people will stand up, less bullies will be in this world.
I think from the perspective of the child, the only thing I would offer is, although it's daunting when an authority figure violates your human rights, know that you do in fact have human rights. I felt like that was one thing that was muddied quite a bit when I went through that process. As a ninth grader, going through, on social studies, learning about the Canadian Charter, and seeing the right to freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and then juxtaposing that with what was actually happening. It did seem at times that maybe this is just for some people, maybe it's not for all people. But I think that would be the one advice I would offer to kids going through this. You do have rights. It's not okay.
Wonderful. No, I think that's great advice. And so what I'd like to do now is just open the floor to some questions for the time that we have remaining. So I think we have about 25 minutes or so for questions. And so I think we have some questions in the chat. So Abby, I'm just going to turn it over to Abby to facilitate that. Abby, did you want to read some of the questions that are in the chat?
So Serena's hoping to turn on her mic to ask the question. So I'm just going to turn on the mic.
Hold on, before we do that. So for the four of you, do you have a preference in terms of how you receive the question? Do you prefer that they be typed? Are you okay with having people ask questions over the mic? I want to make sure that I defer, to you four on this. Do you have any preference?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Farhad, Sarmad, Naman, or
That's fine.
Okay, go ahead and.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Serena, I'm just turning on your mic, so you're going to be able to ask your question now.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Yeah, I just like to thank you. You're also brave and courage and really a blessing to all of us for going forward with all this. It's a lot, and I really appreciate. I'm feeling a little emotional, but I really appreciate what you've shared. I'm an educator, and just to hear what you young men went through and the families, it's good to know that the teachers were there to support you guys, and that I'm so sorry that this happened. One thing that was of course, there was so much that I want to talk about and ask, but the one thing I really was interested in, I think Naman had spoken a little bit about this when during the cross-examination, you it sounded like, it was quite horrible the way it went across. Do you think there was something that maybe the human rights lawyers or something that could have maybe prepared you better? Or do you think that there's something that human rights can say, like, look, when it's a youth being cross-examined, there's got to be a specific process like this? Like, that didn't sound really a best practice. To hear that was really actually heartbreaking to hear that you went through that. So I'm really sorry that happened. But yeah, do you know, have they talked about that? Like, did the human rights say, like, you know what, we've got to change this, like this with youth, they have to put forward their questions first or prepare you in some way?
I think so. Thank you for your question, by the way. I think they did try to prepare us in the sense of, what kinds of questions might come up. But a lot of the questions that did come up were really, unexpected. I would say that it might be helpful, honestly, if there was some sort of oversight as to the kind of questions that you can ask a younger witness. I think that would be helpful, and failing that, if there was at least some sort of preparation that, you know, this could potentially happen. I think the tribunal judges did actually come out right at the beginning and say that, you know, we want this to be a more relaxed atmosphere. We don't want this to be, you know, as intimidating as it might seem. So they were trying their best to make sure that it was a more open environment. I think it was just, you know, unfortunately that particular lawyer just chose to ask certain questions. But yeah, I think my thoughts.
Thank you very much for your question. And I want to give, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. I want to give this. It was 6.5 hours of a 14 years old, 15, 16, something like that, 16 years old. And he was so nervous. He was constantly drinking water. And he was sitting there for 6.5 hours, so scared. He didn't go to the bathroom. He didn't ask for the bathroom break because he did not know. And your question is very good, that there should be a process where, you know, kids should be interrupted and saying, you know, maybe you need to take a break, maybe you. And when Naman came out of that interrogation, he was a corporate lawyer, and the way he asked the question, it was an abuse of its own. And Naman was holding his bladder for like 6.5 hours, and he was in tears, and he came out and he was crying. And he said, maybe I did all wrong, I messed it up. Because when we were in the court, it was not only for us, it was for a lot of people. It was for all those people who are in a situation they can't speak up. So he was so scared that he messed it up for everybody. And this is a very genuine question you ask. I didn't quite catch your name, but thank you very much.
Thank you
For pointing it out, and this would be a good for HRC to see that, you know, young kids. I mean, once the questioning start, I don't think the judges can stop, just to be fair for the process. But to remember that these are little kids, you know, and they shouldn't be put on a situation to say that you have to give this scholarly opinion about this part of your faith.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that question, Serena. Also, we have many wonderful and fine educators here in Yukon, of which Serena is one. So thank you so much for that question. And thank you also for that answer. And I would echo what Serena said about all four of you being immensely courageous, not just in terms of what you've gone through, but also of discussing it, you know, the way that you have, not just with us this afternoon, but, you know, elsewhere. So, Betty, any other questions in the chat?
Not right now. I do have one myself, and that is, how do you feel like this process as a child, as a parent, could be more trauma informed? So could support individuals who are going through these difficult times. How do you feel that was either lacking, or what was done well for it to be a trauma-informed process?
I guess just from my perspective, I think the Human Rights Commission lawyers and the tribunal members were very open, and the questions that they posed were quite trauma informed. They definitely, it seemed like they took the time to think about the potential, you know, the potential for re-experiencing trauma. But then on the part of the cross-examination, it felt like that was lacking. Yeah, I think if that could be part, again, of the process of oversight, particularly, again, for younger children, if that was able to be implemented in some way, I think that would be a great great avenue for improvement. But thank you so much for that question.
Interrogation. It was the interrogation like we were a bunch of criminals. That's how it felt, really. And we were constantly asking each other, all we wanted was a prayer. We didn't even want a space. We can even go behind the tree. I even asked, we can go in the basement. We can invest money in a place which is not even like a store or something. And we could invest and make it a place where everybody can come and then they can have their prayer or anything like that. So it felt like a bunch of criminals. That's how it felt. Yes. The kind of questioning it went through. But alhamdulillah, the support was there. Our friends and Human Rights Commission is a big support for, yes. And I think it would be a very good idea to educate in schools and in universities and places, and let them know that if you are discriminated or you feel threatened or bullied or something, come and talk to us.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much for that answer. And we have another question that's popped up in the chat, so I'll go ahead and read it. And so it's from Madeline, and Madeline says, "Thank you for sharing your experiences. This having been your experience, would you file another human rights complaint? Has this changed your threshold of tolerance of discrimination/harassment you may face in your day-to-day lives, which could result in human rights complaints later on?" So yeah, having been through what you've gone through, I guess sitting here with us in 2022, and what you've experienced, would you file another human rights complaint if you had to? So I think that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question, has this changed your threshold of tolerance when it comes to discrimination? I mean, undoubtedly, as we know, Islamophobia is something that happens. And I know that in the Yukon, we had released a statement, because you're also in London, you mentioned, we had released a statement in 2021 with the Islamophobic attack that had,
and this is what I'm wearing, and this is the family who gave up their lives. 4 of the individuals are on the corner of our house.
Wow.
So it's so close, like at the same place we go, we visit, like we walk in the same family that the incident happened. I absolutely, there is more need now than ever before. And there should be more people who should be speaking up. And absolutely, we will file not one application, hundreds of applications.
Yes.
If we have to,
yeah.
Because that's the only way we can move forward.
Yes.
And the process is lengthy, and we can work towards that to improve, but we can't give up.
I think that's a great point. I think, like, regardless of the experiences that we've gone through, both positive and negative, the knowledge that other people are also going through the same thing and don't have a voice, don't have an avenue in order to voice those concerns, don't have an avenue in order to bring light to the situations that they're facing. I think that thought alone would be enough for us to keep going. If there was something like this that happened again, we would definitely file another human rights complaint.
And I also want to make a comment, like our ordeal was very small comparing to what children are going through, in Yukon and in other communities. That just breaks our heart. And this is another push that we gotta keep going. We have to keep forward. We have to keep going. Because there are so many people, they don't even know, they're confused, they don't even know how to react, what to do. And that's how we were at that time. But Alhamdulillah, we found people who supported us and educated us. And we are very thankful for HRC for that.
In terms of, sorry, the second part of the question with regards to the threshold, I think it really depends on a situation by situation basis. I think in a lot of situations, there is room for educating the person who might be, inadvertently or maybe unintentionally violating a human right. So I think that sort of education, that sort of dialogue should still happen. I think the threshold is probably still the same if, dialogue fails and there's no resolution is being reached, and people are being harmed, children are being harmed, human rights are being violated, then I think that definitely still warrants a human rights complaint. So I think it depends on the situation.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. Madeline, Bessie, thank you, Madeline, for that question. Abigail, are there any, do you see any other questions in the chat?
Not right now. Madeline wants you to know that she is very glad that you felt empowered after this experience to move forward with further human rights complaints, should you be in the position to do so.
I'll ask a very quick question, and we have about 8 minutes left anyway, so I think maybe that will be a nice segue to wrap up. Is how does it feel, I guess, to know that your case or your cases are studied by law students all across the country now? So you're in, you're in the legal textbooks. How does it feel? I think, particularly as doctors, maybe, how does it feel that, maybe your first impact may have been in the legal textbooks rather than the medical textbooks? Do you have any thoughts on maybe the fact that this has been, a pretty big deal in the country? Do you ever give that any thought and what your reactions are to it?
In my experience, I think I just feel humbled that I was able to be part of this. And even though, the experiences were definitely, took a toll and were difficult to go through, the fact that I've been able to contribute in that way and that our case could potentially be used to help somebody else, I think that humbles me. That humbles me and makes me feel great. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, I've been able to contribute something. We have been able to contribute something.
I always feel this responsibility that I have to do. So any bit of help, like anything, I feel like I haven't done anything. And but whatever we could do is just a relief that at least a tiny bit of burden of responsibility. I have a huge burden of responsibility to do things, and a tiny bit is less now. That's how I feel, like, because we have to do so much. We are like, there's so many people are suffering. I feel like I'm not doing anything. This is nothing. We haven't done anything. We have to do more. Yeah.
No, and thank you all. And just before I give you the last word, just to say whatever else you'd like that we haven't covered in our discussion, I just want to, again, thank you for your courage in having brought the human rights complaint. I mean, I can only imagine what it takes to see this through, after 5 rounds of litigation. And, to your point, Justice Neufeld, observing that this has taken, so long. I think for us, as a Human Rights Commission, it really does crystallize for us, our mission, in terms of being trauma informed, in terms of being compassionate to people that we interact with, in terms of being impartial, fair, and understanding where people are coming from. I think it's very helpful to us, that are working in this area. So I want to thank all of you for your courage, for your efforts, for staying with it, particularly, given your backgrounds, given the fact that, Naman and Sarmad, you were children when this happened, and, now you've turned into a doctor who I'm sure you will be in the medical textbooks as curing some disease. And Sarmad, with what you've done, you'll probably solve the climate crisis. I'm sure we're putting more hopes on all of you, which might sound unfair. But with that being said, I just want to give you a couple of minutes to say whatever else you'd like in closing that we may have missed. So I'll give you the last word before we end. In whatever order. Maybe what I'll do is I'll start in the order of the squares I see on my screen. So Sarmad, I'll start with you, and then Naman, and then Dr. Nazar, yourself, and then finally Farhad, if you have anything in closing to say. And of course, you don't have to say anything if you don't want to, if you think you've said it all. But if you did want to say anything in closing, I'll start with Sarmad. The floor is yours, please.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I guess just Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present our experiences. And just to echo my mom's thoughts, we're just humbled that we've been able to be part of this process in whatever little way that we have been able to. And we're just very appreciative of all the support that we've had, both from the Human Rights Commission and from, friends, family, and other people who have been so gracious as to support us.
And just a note on us being involved in this process, it feels like we made such a small little step. There's so much going on in the background, like all the work the lawyers are doing. It feels strange that like our name is showing up in those textbooks when there's so much going on in the background. So we're very appreciative of that.
I just wanted to say, like, the pain and agony of our Aboriginal community, especially, like, it's just, I can't fathom that even things are happening now. It's just very painful, mind-boggling, and I don't know. I wish I could do more. We should all do more for human beings. You're all human beings. How could we rest when even one of us is in pain? How could we, we should be like a body. If one part is hurt, the whole body should be in pain. And it's just going on. It's very, very difficult. It's very, I hope and I pray that may Allah guide us all. May our Creator guide us all, and we gotta stop. We gotta stop.
Yeah, in this time of awareness and this time of media and stuff, that these their rights are violated. It's very stressful. It's very bad. It should be stopped.
No, thank you for that. I can't think of a better way to conclude. So thank you once again for taking the time out of your afternoon so that we could have the benefit of your insights and your experiences. And I'm sure, I personally found this very helpful and illuminating. I'm sure that everybody listening and participating would agree with me. So I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I want to wish to everybody joining us, I want to again wish you a happy International Human Rights Day. I hope that we all take them, at least a minute to recognize the importance of human rights, and of course, just a blurb about the fact that at the Yukon Human Rights Commission, of course, we are available to any of you and all of you, whether that's for policy reviews, training, if you think that your human rights may have been violated, or that you want to file a human rights complaint here in the Yukon, or if you want training, or you just want to know more about human rights in the territory or what we do, please contact us, give us a call, send us an email, and we'll do everything that we can. We are here for everybody in the territory, and we aspire to do what we can to support all of you. Let's all take time to reflect today on the importance of human rights internationally, in the country, locally, and we should all hopefully recommit ourselves to this struggle for human rights and why it's so important. And we've had a very eloquent example of why these things are important. So I want to thank all of you. On that note, I will stop talking, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And we will be uploading this onto our social media pages, our website. So if you know of anybody that might be interested in the subject matter that we discussed or wanted to be here but couldn't, we will make this available for everybody in unrestricted fashion. So please, share the information. Now I'll stop talking for real. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much.